There are no people left in the so-called Ukraine. Ukrainians are fleeing. There is no one left to mobilize. Soon, students will be drafted. Women are being recruited on a massive scale. These and other theses we regularly hear from all irons. They are talked about on federal television. Bloggers write about them without understanding the situation. Let's put it this way. The mobilization reserve of the AFU is still 12 million people. They can't call up all of them at once, because such a crowd of people must not only be trained and equipped, it must also be controlled. But the losses of the AFU are still high. Pay attention to these figures. Thanks to our agents and the general staff of the AFU, we managed to calculate how much the Ukrainians have actually lost since the beginning of the conflict. So, as of December 1st, 2023, the total irrecoverable losses of Ukrainian armed formations amounted to 536,000 people. These include the disabled, the maimed, the unrecoverable, the missing, and the simply dead. 214,000 killed, 62,000 rotting and decomposing on the battlefields, either escaping somewhere or in captivity. That's not so important. But there's a variable component as well, which is the 864,000 who are lightly or moderately wounded.
Estimates of Ukrainian killed in action range from a low of just over 30,000, according to a Ukrainian civic group, as of November this year, to 70,000, according to anonymous US officials, as of August this year, to a high of 400,000.
Are you kidding me?
Obviously, these two estimates can't be reconciled, but it really matters to the people of Ukraine. Which one is closer to the truth?
All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
While 30,000 is tragic, anything approaching 400,000 killed in action and the accompanying hundreds of thousands of casualties is a humanitarian catastrophe that, according to the Epoch Times, makes talks of continuing an offensive next year or even believing in a stalemate wishful thinking that will result in even more fruitless Ukrainian deaths.
Їдемо. Під нами 3 трупа. Зверху живі пацани. Так от виїжджаємо ми з Куп'янського лісу.
The US and its allies have unswervingly pushed the narrative that Russia is incurring far more casualties than Ukraine. This narrative was critical to maintaining any plausibility that Ukraine could defeat a country that has 4 to 5 times more men of military age, and which, by the way, was recently stated as having the most powerful military in the world. Hence the need to maintain the illusion of a Ukrainian victory.
What the fuck? I won a lottery?
Hey, let me get that, folks. What?
Isn't surprising, the article reads that NATO intelligence officials asserted that the Battle of Bakhmut saw Russia losing at least 5 soldiers killed in action for every one of Ukraine's. As Bakhmut fell to the Russians, the failure of the much-hyped Ukrainian counteroffensive and the signs that Ukraine's military is nearing collapse, we are no longer hearing about the 5-to-1 casualty rates. Still, the most recent estimates from the US and British officials claim that Russia suffered 120,000 killed in action when Ukraine suffered only 70,000. But these estimates are hard to believe, given that Ukraine started the war by mobilizing nearly 1 million men in arms, and over the course of the war, mobilized another 1 million, reaching a critical threshold of mobilization, given the estimated population, which stands at a mere 20 million.
Мобілізовувати 20-річних, 18-річних. В чому проблема? Що студенти? Ну і що? Студенти не мають воювати? Мають. Вони підходять. Вони що, не вміють, не готові, не народжені для війни? Ніхто не вміє, не готовий, не народжений для війни.
In a recent interview, retired US Colonel Douglas McGregor estimated that Russia could have lost between 50 to 60,000 killed in action. Relying on his sources, he put the Ukrainian killed in action figure at 400,000, of the 2 million mobilized men.
They still haven't admitted the truth, which is we're looking at roughly 500,000 dead Ukrainian soldiers. This evening, I heard a retired general say, well, perhaps 125,000. Well, that's a fraction of what we know has happened.
Arrived at this figure from contacts within U.S. intelligence and on the ground in Ukraine as well as Poland, who have intimate knowledge of what's really happening in Ukraine. Colonel McGregor has also received accounts of thousands of wounded Ukrainians being left to die on the battlefield. Growing numbers of Ukrainian commanders and troops refusing orders to conduct suicide attacks against heavily fortified Russian positions. Hospitals overflowing with wounded Ukrainians, and the list goes on. Additionally, the colonel's contacts have analyzed satellite imagery showing massive expansion of Ukrainian cemeteries and countless tens of thousands of fresh graves. So you have to ask, is there evidence that we can look at to support the colonel's assessment? And the short answer is yes. Firstly, history tells us that artillery-centric wars such as World War I and the Ukraine-Russia war produce massive amounts of casualties and killed in action. During the short period that the US fought the Germans in World War I, it suffered 318,000 casualties, including 53,000 killed in action over a period of just 120 days, or roughly 4 months. Add to that another 60,000 who died due to disease and accidents. Secondly, Russia started the war and continued to maintain a 10-to-1 advantage in artillery power while producing up to 7 times more artillery shells than all other NATO nations combined. Thus, it is expected that Russia would be far ahead in terms of casualty ratios. Thirdly, Russia's advantage in long-range strike capability, drone warfare, and electronic warfare would only add to its ability to inflict disproportionate casualties.
Скажи, скільки ті років?
56-й.
Як 200-метровка?
4,2. Стартує пизди.
Отак ми трошки бігаємо. Всім привіт. А нам удачі.
Fourthly, the fact that the average age of a Ukrainian soldier has increased over time from roughly 32.5 years to 43 years is solid evidence of the catastrophic casualties Ukraine has suffered during the war. Another sign is the desperate attempts from President Zelensky to radically increase the number of women serving in the military.
Мы женщины Украины. Мы благословили наших мужчин на защиту нашей земли.
Despite the fact that women are at a severe disadvantage to men when it comes to close-range combat. Then you can talk about the anecdotes describing the average life expectancy at the front lines of Bakhmut being up to 4 hours, as well as the accounts of poorly trained Ukrainians being rushed into combat. This massive casualty rate has, contrary to Western media, continued for Ukraine in its battle of Avdiivka. We got the first sign of a Ukrainian slaughter on November 28th, when the Daily Express published this article, where Ukrainian commander Ole Sentsov told CNN about his men's failed mission to try and gain ground in the area, saying his soldiers were, and I quote, completely destroyed in battle. He said in quotations again that we tried to get a forest landing about 1 kilometer long. Our assault group was told to hold a trench of 150 meters wide, but after 50 meters, they could not push further because of strong Russian resistance. All the operations my company conducted, the commander said that this was the first time they failed to complete the mission. We were driven out because we were not able to hold our positions, so we retreated. Our group withdrew with injuries but survived. But the other two groups that were attacking at the same time, together with us, were almost completely destroyed. There is, of course, casualties suffered by the Russians in Avdiivka as well. According to the Times of India, the Associated Press obtained aerial footage of a Ukrainian military drone unit near Stepove on the northern flank of Avdiivka, which appeared to show the bodies of about 150 soldiers, most of which were alleged to be wearing Russian uniforms, scattered along the tree line. The drone unit, however, admitted that it is possible that some of the dead were Ukrainians. Nonetheless, Colonel Douglas McGregor says that given the strong evidence that Ukraine is suffering what he calls country-destroying casualties, talk of a stalemate is more about face-saving than any realistic chance of Ukraine avoiding a defeat. The only moral path forward for the US is to tell President Zelensky that it's well past the time to sue for peace and that he must accept neutrality and the loss of regions that seceded from Ukraine in 2014. And the stakes are getting higher for Ukraine, as according to a German newspaper, The Bild, Russia plans to not only occupy the entirety of Donetsk and Luhansk Oblast, but also to advance to the Oskil River in Kharkiv Oblast by the end of 2024. Then, in 2025 and 2026, they plan to take over large parts of Zaporizhia and the Dnipro Oblast. Interestingly, the report says the south of Ukraine is no longer a priority for Russia, as Russia only wants to stop Ukrainian forces from advancing towards Crimea. To achieve this objective, Russia is relying on some assumptions. Most noteworthy is the assumption that its war economy continues to grow and become more effective.
40%, юань 33%, совокупное использование доллара и евро 24%. Было 87, стало 24. Зачем они это сделали? Это, повторяю, выстрелили себе в ногу. Плохо это для нас или нет? Да нет. Вообще, чем больше мы используем национальную валюту в экономических расчетах, в расчетах финансовых.
As well as the assumption that they can continue to kill on average 100,000 Ukrainians per year. In my opinion, this is a mixed bag of truth and deception, as though not mentioned in this report, there is no doubt in my mind that Russia wants to take Odessa. In fact, their comment that they are no longer interested in the south of Ukraine may signal the exact place they will attack next. Perhaps an amphibious landing in Odessa is in the making.
Black Sea shore went to Russia following the Russian-Turkish wars. This has nothing to do with Ukraine. Odessa is a Russian city.
Stay tuned to this channel and I will bring you any more updates. Until then, have a look at this video right here about the West's claim of Russian losses being 90% of its pre-war army that I completely debunk. And put a comment in the comment section if you think Russia will plan to take Odessa in the next year.